and welcome to the Build and Exit podcast. I'm Julie Wilkinson and I'm your host. And I started the podcast off the back of the work I do in my company, Wilkinson Accounting Solutions, because we offer accounting and consultancy services where we work with acquirers and investors. And I noticed there was a gap in the market of people really understanding financial statements. So I'm really excited. We're on episode 31. This is episode 31. And I'm excited to have Steve Lawrence with us. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Julie. Hello.
Steve's quite renowned on LinkedIn. He's posted his journey. So a bit of background about Steve. He was a bit like me. He came from a big corporate background and has successfully transitioned to become what I call an acquisition entrepreneur. We'll go into the story a little bit because it's quite an interesting story about the time it takes to we're going to get down to the nitty gritty, I think, of real life, aren't we, Steve?
That's the plan.
But Steve's the owner of the Uncomplicated Group that specialises in the injection moulding sector and has successfully acquired and doing very well at it, I think, from what I see. So welcome, Steve. Do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself and why you wanted to come on the podcast?
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, Julie. I've been following your stuff on LinkedIn for maybe like 3 years, which is probably the amount of time I've been trying to do the getting into the acquisition stuff. So my background is for many, many years, I worked for a big American corporate manufacturing company. And the site that I mainly looked after was an injection molding facility. And I started there as an order processor, worked my way up through the business over many years. And then towards the end of my time, I just decided I needed to do something new, and I didn't really know what it would be. Until I heard about the idea of buying businesses. I had no idea that you could do that. I thought you had to be like a corporation with millions of pounds behind you to buy a company. So I researched it and learned a bit about how to do it, and then decided to go for it. That was 3 years ago. So it's been quite a long journey. I'm sure we'll get into the various ups and downs as we go along. But yeah, let's apply the skills from corporate background onto SME by targeting people who are looking to retire and exit from their injection molding business, and apply a lot of the cool corporate stuff that we've learned along the way from my work background.
Yeah. And I do love your story because I follow you as well, Steve. I do love your LinkedIn posts because they're just like real life and tell people how it is really, which I like. So what I find interesting about your story, so that transition from corporate to acquisitions, because I know we've spoken about it before, is there was a time, wasn't there, in your job when you gave up the job because you thought you had an acquisition in the pipeline and it fell through.
Yes.
So talk us through a bit about how you decided to finally make that transition out, and then what kind of happened in this turmoil. Maybe it was turmoil. I don't know at the time. I'm sure it probably was at the time.
Yeah, well, I was, like I said, I was a long-term corporate guy and was pushing for the promotions and increased responsibility in corporate. And then I just decided I wanted to do something else. And for about a year, I was looking at acquisitions and looking at potential deals while I was still working. And I did it probably the same way as a lot of other first-timers do, where you spend a lot of time looking at all of the broker network and the websites that have got businesses for sale. Wouldn't necessarily say that's the best or the only place you can find deals, as I've learned now. But at the time, that's all I knew. So I was doing it alongside my job for a while. And I had one that fell out because the funder pulled out on me. That was for me being really green about deal structure. And then I had another one where I thought I'd learned enough lessons that I was like, right, it's time to quit the job. I was probably about 7 months into due diligence. The SPA was pretty much built, meaning all the money was pretty much spent from my side on legals and things. And we'd agreed a hypothetical date that we would do the completion. So I thought, right, I had quite a long notice. I had a 3-month notice on my job. So I needed to kind of gamble quite early. I couldn't just quit really close to completion. So I quit my job, got ready to take over. And all along, the seller had told me that he was going to be moving to Australia to spend more time with his daughter. He had family in Australia. They were looking to exit. The chap was, I think he was 72 at the time. And right at the end, it became quite apparent that he didn't really want to sell. I don't think he was emotionally ready to do it. And yeah, as you can imagine, lots of money spent, lots of swearing, lots of phone calls, and you've quit your job. So now I'm sitting at home with zero other opportunities, no like deal flow or other things on the go. And yeah, the deal just completely fell out. So on one hand, I'm here on LinkedIn about, yeah, I'm going to do an acquisition and posting every day, trying to build my profile and all this sort of stuff. Then on the other hand, my deal's just fallen out of bed and I'm completely back at scratch with nothing else on the go. So yeah, as you say, that was unexpected, but I think probably a bit arrogant on my part. I thought, I'll give it 6 months. If other people can do this, I'm sure I can. How hard can it be? Type mindset when I went into it. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than I'd realised at the time. I think looking back, I'm actually not disappointed that deal didn't happen. The company was probably too small. It would have been really hard to scale it, and I think I was just too grateful to have a deal. I'd said to myself I was going to do it and made all this noise, and I wanted out of corporate, and I was just pleased to be found someone who'd accepted an offer, and I sort of rushed through heads of terms, and but it wasn't really the right way to do it. So a blessing that it fell out, and also after that, when I had absolutely nothing, it forced me to refocus and actually have a proper strategy about what I'm trying to do, rather than just sitting on the broker websites hoping for something to come along that's local to me, that was doable. It forced me to really go again of like, okay, what's your background? What are you trying to achieve? What does a good deal look like? How are you going to do this? Who are the people that you need to make connections with? So then by not having a job, it gave me loads of time to go and do that. And I think I ended up with a better deal. But at the time, there's no way I was thinking like that. I was too busy, just couldn't believe that I'd quit the job, and I had absolutely nothing on the go at the time.
And what happened with the money that you spent? Did you? I'm presuming the seller pulled out. Did you get any reimbursements for the money you'd spent?
No,
So
nothing.
did you not have a clause in your heads of terms for that? Oh,
It's
who
one of
drafted
those,
your heads? Who drafted your heads? Did you do it yourself or?
I had it glanced at by a few other people in the who were also looking to do the same as me, which was a really expensive way to learn not to do that. So yeah, don't do that. I learned that the second time around on the one that we'll talk about that did go through. But yeah, I was just so happy that someone had accepted an offer and that we were going to jump into due diligence, that I hastily put together like a template thing. Wouldn't have stood up in any kind of legal battle anyway. So yeah, I had to take a bath on the cost of the legal fees.
Yeah. Oh well, you live and learn, don't you, as they say. So anyway, that fell through. You reapplied and then you did find, I suppose, the deal that you've got now. But I know that took quite a long time, didn't it, as well, for you to acquire it. So what happened? So how long did it take you then from when that one fell through, the first one? How long did it take you to find the one that you ended up successfully acquiring in the end?
From offer acceptance to completion, it was about 6 months. But there was a couple of months beforehand of just having like exploratory visits and conversations and stuff. So probably 8 or 9 months all in. The funny thing about it was the day that the deal fell out on the first one, in my probably anger and desperation, I just Googled injection molding businesses for sale UK because I had no idea about any other deal flow or anything at all or other opportunities. And then this one came up that I ended up buying. So I'm not advocating that you can just Google the business you want to buy and it's going to pop up on page one. I was just really, really lucky. But yeah, it just popped up. And then I, for a little while, was a bit intimidated about it because it was bigger than the other ones I'd looked at. And I was thinking, I'm not sure if this is bigger than what I can do or can it be done? But I decided to go for it and build a relationship with the seller. And in the end, obviously, it all worked out okay. But yeah, it wasn't, I don't think you're supposed to find your deals on Google. That's probably a bit overly simplified.
So how did you know they were selling then? Did they say on Google they were selling?
It was a plastics industry website. So it was almost like a classified section of a site that people in the industry use to sell used materials and old equipment and advertise vacancies and things like that. And they just had a classified section for businesses for sale. And you never know how many other people will have got in touch with the seller, whether it was genuine. But I gave it a punt because at that point I was pretty desperate just to start again, having literally gone from scratch. So yeah, and then from there went and met the chap. So the business is in Manchester and I live in Kent. So that was another kind of hurdle that I had to get over. Do I want to own a business that's really far from where I live? But fortunately, back in my corporate background, we were quite used to doing things in a decentralized fashion where you weren't necessarily the ones doing the doing all the time. So we had manufacturing locations in various different countries. So that didn't phase me too much, apart from like making the initial mental leap as like, yeah, we are actually going to do this. So yeah, met the chap in, I think it was April, might have been March, and then finally completed in October, having gone through the whole due diligence thing once again.
And what made you think? Because obviously, I mean, did you tell this seller that what had happened previously? Did you talk about it, or did you just keep it quiet, or did you tell them what had happened previously to
I was
you?
really honest. Yeah, I said to him that it had I'd lost it and we were starting again. He was asking. I remember him asking. So tell me about the uncomplicated group. And I'm like, there isn't a group. It's just me, and I'm trying to do a deal. So I had to be really honest. There's no point lying about these things. The process of buying a company, I think, is so much about that relationship and trust. So there's no point trying to create a smokescreen around what you are or what you're not. So yeah, I did tell him, and I also said there's a few things because he'd never sold a business as well before. The chap who I bought it from. So I said there's a few things that I've learned that I absolutely will not do again, and I think it will help this deal go through more smoothly. So number one, like you mentioned earlier, was heads of terms. I said if we do agree, the heads is it sets the tone for the rest of the due diligence and the rest of the build of the SPA. Whereas previously I just wanted to get it out of the way so I could get closer to completion. So I said at that point, we insisted that he got his legal team involved, that I had legal as well, so that we really set it up from the beginning and went into the warts and all. You know, the little bits that come up at the end where you really don't want them coming up at the end. They need to come up at the start of the conversation before everyone's spent loads of money. So I learned that lesson, not to just try to fudge it and go through and do it yourself. And the other thing that was quite good that we sort of took away from the first time was I think the seller on the first deal was a bit intimidated by the depth of the due diligence questions. So I'd sent this huge questionnaire of all the stuff, and a lot of it wasn't relevant, and a lot of it was, like I say, probably intimidating for a chap who's just looking to retire, who's run his factory a certain way for many years. So I showed the seller of the deal of Tech Markets, the deal that went through. I showed him it right at the beginning. I said, look, this is what due diligence will look like. If there's anything in here that you think you can't answer or that you need to prep for, let's have the chat now rather than back and forth between lawyers when it gets expensive and when we're going to potentially damage our relationship. Let's just try and do it now. So it was kind of useful that the first one went so far right in the wrong way that I could apply that this time around and make it a bit smoother.
Yeah, because I've got a deal at heads of terms now, actually, and when we put in the offer, they were like, "Oh, it's brilliant. We don't need to do heads of terms. We can go straight to due diligence." That's what. And I said no. I said we do heads of terms because, like you say, it's not all legally binding, but there's elements of it that are, and it just sets out the tone. To me, it's good practice. We always use a solicitor to do our heads of terms. And as it happens, the purchase price, there was like some large debtor that wasn't clear what it was, which they couldn't give when we signed heads of terms. And as it happens, it was useful. We're still looking at the deal. It still looks quite viable, but there were things that then came out when we started due diligence that wasn't, that they couldn't provide the information for at the heads. So we put the clauses in at the heads to say, it's these stipulations, these are the things we're unclear about. So then as we've come to them, we can be like, look, we discussed that. And yeah, as it doesn't matter too much because ultimately the deal's not finalised, but it allows, but what can happen if you don't put those in at the heads and are clear about it, then if you find it, and I suppose it could go either way, it could improve the deal, it could reduce the deal. You don't really know which way it's going to go, but let's just say it reduces the deal, which in a majority case, I see it normally goes down, not up.
Sure.
It becomes a difficult conversation because they can then think, oh, you're trying to do them out. They think, oh, no, you're just trying to not pay me the money. Whereas if you kind of mentioned the risks, in my experience anyway, of seeing all these deals, if you mention the risks, then it can help have those conversations when you get to due diligence. That's why I think the heads are so important.
Yeah, if you can't agree the heads with someone in a few kind of non-contentious items, imagine what it's going to be like in 3 or 4 months when you're 10 to 15 grand into legal fees and you're getting deal fatigue and it's right towards the end. So I think it's also like a marker of the relationship that you've built with the seller to that point as well. If you can
Yeah.
both collaborate at that point, then it kind of sets you up a bit better as you go through the process.
Yeah, and I always think, because when you said you rushed through the first one, I mean, I see that a lot with
Mm,
buyers. They get a bit excited, maybe, or whatever.
yeah.
But the problem is, if the seller is being awkward at the beginning, now, not being able to provide the information is one thing, because some people just don't
Mm,
have it, and you've got to make a decision if you want to go for a deal because you think the business is still viable. Because most of the
mm,
time, the businesses aren't going to have a lot of information. So there's one thing not having it, but then there's another thing of them being awkward about answering questions. And I see a lot where they're being awkward about answering questions. Not on my deal. My deal's been, our sellers are really nice, but on other deals I've seen, but yet they still rush through, thinking that once they get to
yeah.
heads and go to a, it's all going to suddenly change and it's going to get the
Mm,
information. I'm like, but if they're being awkward now, why is that going to change when you
absolutely.
get to it's going to get even worse, isn't it? Because the questions are going to get even more. I mean, I remember speaking to someone that was looking at buying something, and we asked like one question, and they were like, "Why are you asking me that question?" The seller, and it was, and they came back to me. They're like, "Oh, well, they've asked why you've asked that, and there better not be any more questions like that." And I'm just like, "What?" I'm like, "That's like one
No.
question." So we've got like 70 questions to come. If they can't
Mm,
cope with one, they're
yeah.
never going to be able to cope with the 70.
Too right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so it took this time to acquire, but you did successfully acquire it. And you're
Yes.
obviously quite open on LinkedIn. That's why I like the post, because you sort of give the journey of the
Mhm.
of the problems. But I know that there's been positives and negatives post acquisition. So I thought maybe we could have a
Sure.
bit of a check about what happened after you closed it, what then happened
Yeah.
after. So maybe some of the pros and cons of so what do you
Mhm.
think were struggles after you closed it? What was you not prepared for, maybe, or came as a bit of a surprise?
I think the phrase that's kept me sane for the last 6 months is the opportunity is the threat, and the threat is the opportunity. So you know when you're buying from a retiring owner. I don't want to generalize across the board, but I guess in most cases the business may not be as modern in terms of software, in terms of tech, in terms of financial practice, in terms of from a manufacturing perspective, shop floor practice, and the way the team are led. They're probably not as modern or as automated or whatever as perhaps certainly someone from a corporate like myself was used to. So I knew when you're buying from a retiring owner, those are things you're going to need to work on. However, they were a bit further behind than what we'd anticipated. And it was stuff that probably we could have found out or done a better job at due diligence to find out, but it wouldn't have stopped us doing the deal. So the main one was the was on the finance side. The accounting software, it wasn't live. It was backed up on a USB stick, and it was only looked at on a Saturday. So all of the orders, credits, debits, everything that was happening throughout the week on one computer in the office was backed up and then processed into like a separate version of the accounting software over the weekend. So nothing was live. You had no idea who to chase for debt, who to pay, no idea of the margin in the month. There was no month end process or anything like that. So it was just like ins and outs constantly without any real way of knowing if you're winning or losing. So when you start and you take over and you've again made all the noise on LinkedIn and all these things, and you've taken over and you've taken out a loan to buy the company, and you're the new owner and you've got your model of how you think this is all going to play out that you're trying to measure the business against to make sure you're on track. We didn't have anything to measure it against because there was no month-end processes and the data wasn't live. So the first thing we had to do immediately was, right, we're not doing this. I think it was like day 6. We said, no, can't carry on like this. So immediately went over to a cloud-based software for accounting, so that I can see it when I'm not there as well as when you're on site, because we just couldn't carry on backing up our data onto a stick. It just wasn't really a way we could do it. I think the other thing that was probably a bit more of a surprise was where the again where the chap was retiring. He was spending a bit less time in the business towards the end, And I think the roles and responsibilities of the people in the business, it wasn't really clear. So everyone really works very, very hard, and they do everything they can for the customer to get stuff out of the factory into the customer's hands. But there was a lot of jobs that were interlapping, and people were doing a bit of everything. And it wasn't really clear who owned things. And that meant the chap in sales would cover the shop floor, and then shop floor would be doing purchasing, and then this weird kind of finance situation. So when you start to try and work out what a plan is for the business, no one really knew what their job was, where it begins and where it ends. So then it's really hard to measure people, or to know like who even is doing the job that they should be, who needs training, where have we got any gaps in the business. So spent a lot of time cleaning up the financial systems. And on the management team now, we've got really good definition of the functions. It's taken a bit longer than I would like. We're only now doing that onto the shop floor in the business. It was probably, I'm on month 7 now, which is coming into month 7. So probably 3 months on the financial side, cleaning up the back end data and the software. Then a few months of recruiting a factory manager and getting job descriptions. So now the next natural step is to sort out the shop floor. But yeah, in amongst all of that, of course, while you're trying to do that, you've still got to run the factory, which is running in the sort of old school way of the previous owner too. So see LinkedIn posts for more detail. I could probably talk for hours about all of the stuff we found. I was in the factory this week, and I literally saw a kitchen sink on the mezzanine, and I haven't got a clue why. So that probably tells you the amount of stuff we were storing and keeping just in case. But I don't know what the just in case is for finding a kitchen sink. I'll have to get to the bottom of that one next time I speak to the team.
Yeah, and I think like people have to be realistic when they buy businesses. I mean, I do think the UK is quite far behind on exit planning. So the realism is most businesses being sold probably are not set up with great reporting and necessarily great systems. But the thing is, if you would never buy a deal, you would never buy a business if you wanted everything to be perfect. No, right. I think the most important thing, what I think in the planning stage of the due diligence, is the budgets people have. And this is where I think the unrealistic comes from, when these courses that are teaching do these no money down deals. That's why I get a bit agitated about these no money down deals, because theoretically it can be relatively easy to buy the business with no money. That's not really the problem. It's not saying you can't, but the problem is you leverage all the cash in that business by paying off that deal and those loans. And then where is your spare working capital for all these things you say? So, let's just say that's taken 6 months to recruit. First of all, it probably cost you five to 10,000 to recruit the manager, the ops manager. So where does that budget come from? Then probably if your finance systems are down for 3 to 4 months, so potentially it's hindering the growth plan that you had. But now the profit that you did have is not really there anymore, because cash wise you're paying back the loan, whether that be the deferral or whether the loan. There's no then contingent cash where there was contingent cash in the business before, and therefore all these things build up and cash flow becomes constrained. That's the thing. So I think as long as you're realistic about those things, or understand it, or have sufficient budgets in, even I suppose if you don't know exactly what it is, you can put contingent budgets in and you can still know you have positive cash flow, then you should be okay, because you should be able to manage those contingents across the different places. But yeah, I'm not, these no money down deals courses, I'm not convinced about them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, funny enough, it was one of your LinkedIn posts ages ago about this exact topic that caused me to take out an additional small term loan. I could have done exactly what you just mentioned, where you do like an invoice finance facility, go to as much as you can of the facility and some deferred consideration, deal done, and you go in. But as you say, then you leave no headroom in case anything goes wrong or any other stuff that comes up, any capex or whatever it may be. So I took out an additional small term loan on top of the invoice finance facility, to mean that the revolving facility wasn't fully drawn when we took over. And it played out really well in the end, because at Christmas time, we sell mainly into the construction industry. So obviously no one's buying any parts in December for construction. So volume went down by 50%. And I hadn't done a particularly good job of looking at the seasonality of the business at due diligence. So we didn't see that coming. So given that I took over in October and we had a quiet December, I had in January, I've got the corporation tax bill, I had a VAT bill, and I had my first deferred consideration payments all due in January, coming off the back of a quiet December. So I was really grateful that we didn't just completely leverage the whole invoice finance facility, because then it would have been like, well, where the hell's that money going to come from? So yeah, you're right. I think as a concept, yeah, the no money down stuff makes sense, but where's the backup coming from?
Yeah. And what they're not telling you, these other groups that do this, is that they've got other businesses where they've probably got a couple of $100,000 spare that they can just pump
Yeah.
into that business when it runs, not runs out of money, but when it's tight. Because at the end of the day, the sleepless nights for the new owner that happen, if this sort of thing happens, is not nice. I've seen businesses that have bought these businesses where they haven't really gone to plan. I'm not saying they've gone insolvent, but it doesn't need to go insolvent. It doesn't need to go as far as that to still be horrible for it's still sleepless nights for the owner. It might be they can turn it around, but at the end of the day, it's still hard work, isn't it? And mentally draining, I think, when you're seeing, oh my God, I've bought this business and now I've got no money and I've leveraged all the assets, so I've got no way to get any more money.
Exactly. So, yeah. Even though I knew I had headroom, it was still stressful at Christmas when you're looking, and because the accounting software wasn't, the data wasn't perfect. So I knew I had this chunk of headroom and everything was fine. But it doesn't stop you worrying as the new owner. You think of the other chap has owned this business and created it from scratch and owned it for 30 years. And I've had it for 7 weeks, and now I'm already worried about this stuff. So it is something that plays on your mind.
Yeah. So where is it now then? I mean, that sort of was the constraints. What's sort of been positive? Where have you grown now? Is it going well now?
Yeah, we're in really good shape. I talk probably more about the bad than the good, which is probably me just not really selling it too well. But I just try and be realistic about what it is we're doing. But there was a lot of we've made a lot of savings in the ops side where it was run in quite an old school way. We've made quite a few decent savings in labour. We've saved and renegotiated on energy. We've renegotiated with some material stuff. The raw material market was softening anyway, so we've saved some money there. We hadn't had time while we were trying to do some cleanup to really get out into the market and do sales and re-engage with our customers. But a couple of weeks ago, we won back an old customer that we lost. That was a nice few % growth for the business. So yeah, I probably should talk more about the good side. We've definitely saved more money than I thought we would in terms of when we initially put it together. But more importantly, I've got a really good management team that are enjoying the business, and everyone has been receptive to me as the new owner. I didn't really know what to expect when you buy a company that's 200 miles away. The team have all been working there for 10, 15, 20 years. And I come in 15 years younger than everybody else, corporate chap, southerner, buying a factory in Manchester. So I've been really grateful for the guys. So the main thing, aside from numbers and all that, is that the guys are really engaged with what we're trying to do. And I'm really pleased that now we're all working towards. We've just done our first annual plan. So we've now actually got numbers that we're working towards. We've found a few areas where we need to reprice our products because the margins are not right, and some areas where we can do improvements in the factory. So it's way more like a, proper company where everyone actually looks at it, measures it and tracks it. And people are enjoying it. So that's the good bit. That's the non-numbers bit, which is actually even more important because it's something to be proud of, that you've taken a company and ironed out kinks, which were pretty probably more of an anvil than an iron to solve it. And now we're in good shape. So it's really good now. It's running nicely. We're coming into a busy period. Again, because I said it's construction, I've only really seen the business in the winter, in the down period for volume. March, April, it all starts to ramp back up for the summer when they're doing all of the builds. So we've got a pretty decent few months ahead of us. And the order book's full. And it's good stuff. It's really good fun at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. And what's your future pipeline? Are you looking for more deals? Do you have anything in the pipeline?
Yeah, we've got probably about a third of our footprint we're not really using very well. So I reckon we could acquire in pretty easily. One of the things I like about injection molding, firstly, it's my background. I've been doing it for a long time, but it's quite simple to consolidate work into one factory. So there's certain tooling will work with certain machinery and certain materials and things, but generally speaking, it's similar skills, similar materials, similar equipment. So if something came along that was a bolt-on that we could bolt into Manchester, we've certainly got the space and the machine capacity to do that. So that's one thing that I've been looking at to try and get a bit more volume going through the site. And I'm also looking as well if anything comes up that's another site that's similar size to Manchester that would run independently, then that also makes sense because we can then share equipment, capacity, we can share design, we can share software, all the usual kind of back office stuff that you can do to save a few quid by consolidating it and sharing it. So yeah, I think for now the real priority would be the bolt-on stuff. Now that the team in Manchester have really cleaned up, it would be really great to push more volume in. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what comes my way.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Steve. I think your journey is brilliant. I think you should be proud. You've done really well with the business. And even though you had the glitches and you might have missed a few things with due diligence, the fact is you dealt with it, haven't you? You've turned it around. So sounds like you've done really well with it. So thanks so much for coming on. Hope you've enjoyed it. And
Awesome.
I just want to thank all of our listeners. We've got nearly 5,000 downloads now in total, so it's pretty good. I mean, it was a year old a few weeks ago, so yeah, it's been pretty good. And if you love our channel, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.